Duncan says, if you want to know about business, health, and places to go, welcome to the show. Yeah, welcome to the show. If you know that you want to grow your business, your practice, and portfolio, welcome to the show. Yeah, welcome to the show.
Hello, and welcome to I'm Simply Saying, the healthcast where the spine meets strategy, alternative healthcare takes center stage, and we discuss how to build thriving medical clinics. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Frances Duncan, founder and CEO of Simply Southern Chiropractic Center in South Carolina. I'm a chiropractor by trade in an entrepreneur's body. I'm excited to guide you through this journey at the crossroads of chiropractic care, integrative medicine, and the art of successful clinic management. Lastly, if you take anything away from this episode today, please leave this podcast a 5-star review. Reviews allow us to hear from our listeners and what interests you. So, without further ado, let's get into the backbone of it all. Welcome to I'm Simply Saying.
Hello, and welcome to I'm Simply Saying. My name is Kelsey, and I am Dr. Duncan's executive assistant, and we are here with our host today, Dr. Duncan.
Hey, everybody.
Today, we are going to be talking about the second half of the hiring funnel. And before we even get into it, we just want to say that if you do take anything away from today, you have this hiring funnel available to you on Dr. Duncan's website, drmaryfrancesduncan.com. If you download this, it's a free download, and it really breaks down all the steps we broke down in the first podcast talking about the hiring funnel. And then it's going to break down all the steps that we're talking about today with the second half of the hiring funnel. So when we get into this hiring funnel, before we even do that, I want to introduce myself fully. My name is Kelsey. Like I said, I'm Dr. Duncan's executive assistant. And today I'm really going to get to kind of show the perspective of the applicant side of the hiring process and my journey with being hired on at the office and kind of the steps that I had to go through. And then Dr. Duncan today is going to be talking about all those steps, kind of giving her tips and tricks on why she does these things, why they're important, and the value of cultivating the great environment that we have at our office. So I say let's hop on into it. The first thing we really want to talk about is why, the hiring funnel is so important.
Yeah, so the hiring funnel I did not create the hiring funnel, but it's been around in other types of businesses and corporations. They use the hiring funnel to hire candidates for their businesses. But I have tailored this to the chiropractic office. And the reason that this is so important is because, like myself as a practice owner, you've got way too much on your plate, and we've got to start delegating some of these tasks to other people. Hopefully, as your clinic grows, you'll eventually hire a hiring manager, a human resources person, and they can sort of take over this hiring. But if you have a system in place, you're not hiring based off of a gut feeling, because while your gut feeling, you need to listen to it. It's sometimes your emotions can take over, especially if you are desperate to find people, and sometimes we make bad hires. But if candidates can follow the steps in this systematic funnel, this is going to help you get a good candidate. It's also going to allow you to, teach this system to somebody else so that they can take over the hiring process. I do suggest, maybe not with your support staff, but at least on the professional level with your doctors, the practice owner, you do need to be involved with this, and especially when giving the job offer. At this point in my career and in the offices, I let our clinic director, he does hiring for support staff. He is totally involved with that. He can make a decision on his own without me. But then when it comes to our professional staff, like the doctors, I'm still very heavily involved with that. And as time goes on, I'll probably be less involved, but I will definitely be involved with the job offer for a doctor in our clinic. But this is a system. It helps you not hire based on emotion. And it's also just being a system allows you to teach other people in your office to help you at least with parts of hiring, because it is very time consuming, and you need to, make a good hire. So that these are multiple reasons why we need a system, and this funnel is really going to help with time management and to funnel out candidates that are not going to be best for your clinic.
Absolutely. And Dr. Duncan, kind of talk us through this hiring funnel and this being the system that it is. Um, we say this a lot in the first podcast, but this hiring funnel is very evergreen. And tell us kind of combining the two of the system and the evergreen concept. Kind of walk us through that.
Yes, this is an evergreen funnel. You always want to be looking. It's for good candidates. Good employees are very hard to find. And when you find them, you need to hire them. Even if you're not looking for a candidate at that time, something's going to come up. Like you're going to have a staff member that moves away. You're going to have a staff member that gets sick. You're going to have a staff member that wants to go off to school. So you need to have enough people in your clinic plus more. I say it's always better to be overstaffed by one person than have just the right amount of staff members. But in order to do that, you've got to constantly be looking, and don't get into desperation mode where you desperately need help and you're just hiring just to hire. Because I mentioned this in the first part, but this is so true. And this was a hard lesson that I learned on my own, and I had to live it and experience it. But it is always better to be short staffed for a short period of time than to hire the wrong person, because one bad apple can make the bushel sour. And toxic personalities are cancer in your clinic, and you have to get rid of them. So you this funnel is going to help us find candidates that are good candidates to begin with, but we don't it's going to take time, like just like chiropractic care. You guys know this, the patient is not going to get better on day one. It's going to take time for them to get better, and they didn't get here overnight. They didn't get their pain overnight. It's not going away overnight. Same thing with hiring candidates. You're not going to get a candidate overnight. You're going to have to work at it. Hiring is a skill, and every mistake you make, you just learn from it, and you are better the next time.
Yeah, I really appreciated walking through that and going through kind of the evergreen process and the system that it was, just because I felt like this system had been done multiple times before me, and so it felt very much like, okay, these people know what they're doing, and that's very comforting from the applicant's point of view, that you're about to go into a business that you want to be confident in the fact that they know what they're doing, and that's how I felt during the hiring process. So I thought that was really important. So, Dr. Duncan, kind of just go ahead and give us a rundown of the hiring funnel steps that we went through in podcast one, and then we'll kind of hop into those other steps that we haven't really broken down yet.
Yes. So there are 11 steps in this funnel that I created. So in the first part of this podcast, we talked about steps 1 through 5. And those steps are: number one, the job posting; number two, call the number; number three, apply via email; number four is email introduction; number five is the phone interview. And so in part two, so today we are going to start with number 6 and go through 11. So number 6 is the in-person interview. 7 is shadowing, and we also do a test project with shadowing. 8 is the reference check. 9 is the personality check. 10 is the background check and drug screen. And number 11 is the final job offer.
Right. So we are going to break down all those last steps today, steps 6 through 11. Go listen to podcast one if you want to see and hear about all of our first steps that we kind of broke down there. So let's start with step number 6, the in-person interview. We feel like this first little chunk of the hiring funnel is more so on the applicant side, where they're following steps, they're going through the systems in order to make sure we know that they can go through a hiring process and follow directions, listen, and put to fruition what they need to. So then we move on to the in-person interview, where the employer, as in for instance Dr. Duncan, would be then coming in and actually doing her research and starting this in-person interview. So Dr. Duncan, kind of give us a rundown on your in-person interview.
Yes. So the in-person interview comes after the phone interview. And so I'll talk first about where we have two different tracks here. One track for our support staff, which are your hourly employees, typically your chiropractic assistants. And then we've got one track for our professional staff, which is typically that is, that's your doctors. So with our support staff, the phone interview was probably 5 to 15 minutes. It was not very long. And you want to have times for the applicant to come in and interview in person. So the in-person interview for a support staff position is just I'm asking a lot of the same questions that I asked in the phone interview, but just more in depth. I will re-ask some of the same questions. When the candidate is here in person, I'm looking at their body language. I am looking at how did they present themselves? Were they on time? If your candidate was not on time, they're out. You do not hire them. And, I always suggest just be honest and upfront with your candidate. If you know when they walk in the door, if they were late or they're not prepared and they're not going to be a good fit for your clinic, just let them know right then. Just say, thank you so much for applying for the position. I don't want to waste your time and this is just not going to be a good fit. And I wish you the best in your career. Thank you so much for considering us for employment, and go ahead and tell them right then. So that is sort of the track for support staff. And this in-person interview, it's also not very long. It takes, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes, not maybe 25. But when the candidate comes into the office, you need to be prepared for them, because this is the first step where you're interviewing this candidate, but they are also interviewing you as well. And so first impressions are lasting impressions. When the candidate comes in the door, your front desk needs to know their name. They need to speak to them. I suggest you give the candidate a tour of the office, because that also will give you something to talk about with the candidate. You can ask them, what are your thoughts of the clinic? Have you ever been to a chiropractor before? And so you really want to make a great first impression, and you're really just learning, what is this candidate's personality? How are they responding? What is their professionalism? And those are some of the things that you are looking at. And so when we're hiring, in our state of South Carolina, there's no certification for chiropractic assistants. In some states there are, but in our state there's not. So we are prepared, and we know that there's a lot of training, that we do with our assistants. I call it Dr. Duncan's boot camp. We put everybody through a 6-week basic boot camp before they're ready, to fully be with patients. But I can teach skill. What the things that I cannot teach are personality, your character, honesty, trust. And so these are the things that you're looking for in this in-person interview. And I have a certain set of questions, like I do in the phone interview, in the in-person interview, that will help you arrive at some of these answers. And so that's really your goal in this in-person interview with a support staff member or a potential member.
Right, right. So, kind of walk us through the doctor side of things. What would that look like compared to like a chiropractic assistant interview?
Yeah. So your doctor in-person interview is going to be when they come to shadow your clinic.
Okay.
So instead of a phone interview with the doctor, I do a Zoom interview, and that is typically going to last at least 45 minutes, sometimes an hour and a half. But you are getting more in depth with that candidate in that initial video phone call. By the time that they come to shadow, I'm sorry, by the time they, come to your clinic, they're shadowing.
Right.
We have combined the video call and the in-person interview into that video call. So the first time that you meet that candidate is once you've asked them to come to your clinic. If they are out of state, you need to host them, pay for their travel, their hotel, their meals. And so that is really the first time that you are going to meet that candidate.
Wonderful. So, anything else you want to include with that in-person interview? How do you like to prepare for those?
Yeah, so I like to make sure I have the cover letter printed out from the candidate and their resume. This is the time that I'm really going to read their cover letter, and I'm really going to read the information that the candidate has provided, because the candidate has already passed a lot of tests and they are interested in the position. We have figured out as the practice owner or hiring manager that the candidate can follow directions. And so this is when you really want to get to know your candidate. And I suggest, you need to know a little bit about them. They also need to know about your clinic too. So, one of the questions, that you want to ask the candidate is, why did you apply to this particular office? What do you know about our office, and have you heard about us in the community? And so that's a little tidbit. If they can answer that question, then that means that they've done their research, which is what you are definitely looking for.
Right. I really like this in the interview process. I mean, the in-person interview for me was a game changer. Walking in, we have a beautiful office. Everyone knows it. It is a beautiful facility. So I walked in and I was like, wow, I'm going to get to work here every day. Are you just kidding me? And then our front of desk ladies are absolutely amazing and they made me feel so welcome. And then having the whole tour and then finally ending up meeting Dr. Duncan and having my resume and my cover letter was on the desk, like printed out in front of me. It felt very much like I was being considered just as much as I was being considered and they were considering me. So that's how it felt for me. And I really appreciated that part of the process. Dr. Duncan, anything else in that in-person interview that you think you need to add?
Not for the in-person interview.
Okay.
So, the next number 7, the next step in this process is shadowing, and we like to do a test project or a test assignment with this.
Right.
So, in the in-person interview, I do suggest that you already have times available if you like this candidate, for the candidate to come in and shadow. So, you want to, just like you tried to do the in-person interview right after the phone interview, you want to try to do the shadowing as quickly as you can after the in-person interview. So for the shadowing, I like to get them in, within the next 2 or 3 days. And for support staff, I have them come and shadow for half of a day. And the reason for this is because you don't want them to come for just an hour. You need them to be there several hours so that they can see, what goes on in this clinic. They can see if they're interested in working with the current team members. Our office can see if we think that they are a good candidate. And so there's a lot of value that comes in shadowing. And the more times that you meet a candidate in person, the more they let their guard down and the more you are able to learn about this person. So this is why we are doing a separate in-person interview from the shadowing, because it's just another chance that we can meet with this candidate once they've gone home after the first time they've met us, and they can think about it, contemplate, is this, something that I'm interested in, before they come back.
Right. So with the chiropractic assistants, what does this test assignment look like for them?
So this is where we want to start to figure out if the candidate is competent. And so with the support staff, we will show them a task, something very simple, like, we'll show them how to get a patient from the lobby and sit them in an adjustment room,
Okay.
or we will show them how to take someone off the massage table. And so we will have the candidate do one of these simple tasks. Now, in the example of the massage table, we would put a current employee on the massage table and then ask the candidate to take them off.
Right.
And so you want to see, can they follow directions? Can they listen to you one time after watching, you do this task, and then perform it on their own? And so you can really pick any very, very simple task. And you may think that it's stupid or ridiculous, but I mean, you'll really learn a lot about the candidate just from asking them to do little things. And also, like, do they have an attitude? Do they think it's beneath them?
Right.
That will show you a lot too about the candidate.
Can they take it seriously?
Right, and not laugh. That,
Right.
we get that. A lot of our chiropractic assistants are younger, maybe yours are too, and they'll laugh. And it's like, this isn't funny. Like,
Right.
we're asking you to get someone from the lobby. Like, this is no joke.
Right.
So
Exactly. And I think those are really prominent things you have to be looking for. So talk us through like a test assignment and a shadowing for a doctor compared to a CA, because it's very different.
Yeah, so the doctor, if they get to the shadowing phase, they need to shadow in your clinic for, in my opinion, at least 2 days, if not
Mm,
3.
right.
So if the doctor's coming from out of town, we typically will fly them in on a Thursday night. They will shadow on Friday and Saturday. We're open on Saturday. Um, and their test assignment is obviously going to be adjusting me. And so while yes, I can teach skill, I can teach adjusting skills, I can teach, how to treat a patient, and I'm looking for other things like personality, bedside manner. I do want to get a feel for where are we starting here?
Right. Where are we starting
Where
from?
even if they've been in practice for years, we still need to figure out, like, what's your adjusting style? That already, by the way, needed to be discussed in the, video interview about adjusting style and how much volume they have seen in the past with when treating patients. So, but the test assignment definitely is an actual adjustment for the doctor. Now, I'll say this on the doctor side. When shadowing, I suggest that you take them out to eat 2 times outside of the office. So the first time I take the candidate out with my current chiropractors. And so I, for that, I want to see, I want my doctors, my current doctors that I love, to see if they like this candidate and if they think they can work with them, because we're a team and we have to help each other out. And if they don't like the candidate or they can't work with the candidate, this is a no go.
Right.
And that's usually on Friday night. And on Saturday night, I always invite the candidate's spouse to come with them. I'll fly them out as well. If they're local, we want the spouse to come to dinner on Saturday night. I'll take the candidate out with I'll take it's me and my husband and the candidate and their spouse or significant other. I love taking them out. And that's for 2 reasons. So number one, usually there's the spouse or the significant other will you can learn a lot about the candidate from them. Um,
Sure.
so, sometimes sometimes the candidate will not they don't like to toot their own horn. So the spouse will tell you a lot of great things. You can learn a lot of great things about the candidate that they probably wouldn't have said about themselves. And so that was the case for one of my doctors in one of our offices. I remember this. His wife was just so complimentary, and he is very um, he's not going to say great things about himself, but she was able to let me know, like, he is a great doctor. He is great with patients. He is great with our kids. And so I was really able to learn a lot about him from her. Now, on the flip side, I also can learn a lot from significant others and spouses. That sometimes they'll tell on the candidate, if something's wrong, you'll start to pick up on that. Like, there's a lot you can learn from a significant other or a spouse. I like to bring my husband to this dinner because he is not in the clinic and he has an outside set of eyes and ears, and he can give me his perspective about the candidate after we go out to dinner too. So it's always good to get um, the opinion of someone, I think, that's not in your clinic day to day.
Right. And the point of view and knowing if they're going to jive with your other doctors and if they're going to jive with you, I think is very valuable because I mean, we really do cultivate a culture here. So having people that are contributing to that culture instead of harming that culture is really valuable for us. Okay. So with this shadowing, the test assignment, I think we've checked everything off. Is there anything else that you want to add with the test assignment?
No, either in step 6 or 7, the in-person interview or the shadowing,
Hmm.
this is where you really want to let the candidate know what the remaining steps are.
Right.
So, this whole interview process is probably very different from any sort of interview process the candidate has been through before. And they're starting to think like, this is taking a while. These are a lot of steps, so I like to go ahead and tell them, you know, the next steps in this process you've shadowed. So now I want to do some checking. So we want to do a reference check. And then the next step is we'll do a personality test. Then I will do a drug screen and a background check. And then the last step is the job offer. And I tell them at this point what their timeline is.
Right.
If it's a support staff candidate, I'll say this can take a week. If it's a doctor applying, I'll say, this can take another several weeks in this process. And so the further down the funnel you get, the likelihood of these candidates being um, a good hire
Right.
and being good in your clinic goes up exponentially. So you really the process starts to go a little bit faster, and you really want to put your time into these last few steps, and you don't want to skip them.
Exactly. So let's break down those last few steps together and really talk about the importance of each and every one of them.
Yes, and it is very easy. This is why we do not want to get into desperation hiring.
Yes.
It is very easy if you like a candidate when they're shadowing to offer them a job offer on the spot. Do not do that. Do not let your emotions let you do things that you should have probably put more thought into. And so we need to do these checks, and I'm going to explain what the checks are and why they are very important.
Great.
So step number 8 is doing a reference check. So after the candidate shadows in your clinic, typically the candidate, if it's a support staff shadowing, they really don't get to see the doctor a lot. We usually like to have them shadow on a very busy day so that they can see what they're getting themselves into. But usually our front desk, they'll tell the candidate, they'll say, thank you so much for shadowing today. Dr. So-and-so will get in touch with you within the next day. And so I will follow up, and either myself, and then in the case of our office, our clinic director does this now. He will follow up and he'll say, please send me 3 professional references. So when we are asking for references, we are specifically asking the candidate for these specific things. We need the first and last name of the reference, what the candidate's relationship to the reference was, how long the candidate worked with the reference, what the reference's job title is, and we need the reference's email and phone number. And so we also harp on getting professional references.
Yes.
So this is going to tell the hiring manager or the practice owner a lot about the candidate. So preachers are not professional references. Aunts and uncles are not professional references. Classmates or coworkers that were in the same position are not references that we are looking for. And so we want to see, you need to do these reference checks, and you need to make these phone calls, because you can learn a lot. You think you might not, but you can learn a lot of information from the references that the candidate gives you. On the doctor side, if you are interviewing a student that's in chiropractic school or one that just graduated, their references are probably going to be professors. I'm really interested if they had a job in undergrad, in college, or in chiropractic school. Say they worked, at a restaurant or at a clothing store. I like those references because those managers and business owners probably can tell you a little bit more about the candidate's work ethic than their professor.
Right.
So, and then sometimes we'll have practice owners themselves that are ready to close their practice. They will apply for positions. And so sometimes they've been in practice for a while, and they were the employer. So in that case, I like to get references from maybe other chiropractors in the same town, maybe a vendor that they used and have a good relationship with for a long time, buying supplies or whatever. So those are a little bit harder, but we want to have quality references there.
Right. So talk us through the value of calling all 3 references.
Yes, you need to call all 3 references. And so how I go about this is I typically will email the candidate, and I will say, hey, Sally applied for a position at my office and she listed you as a reference. I would love to spend 10 minutes on the phone with you. asking about, I want to talk about Sally. So, and I also provide, 3 different times that'll work for me. And I'll say I'm available on these days and these times. And so typically you don't want to ambush any of these reference checks. I like to set up a time to talk. And if you don't get a response via email, then I will text the reference and see, same thing, tell them who I am and see if we can set up a time to talk. And typically that you can, sometimes it's hard to get a hold of people, but usually if I text and email, they will respond. Now, if you have 3 references and you aren't able to get in touch with all 3, I do suggest going back to the candidate, letting them know, and either, getting another reference, like a 4th reference, or sometimes if you let the candidate know that the reference isn't responding, sometimes that helps the reference, come around and respond because they may not know that they're listed as a reference. So,
Kind of go through, I know like we're talking about listing references of past employers. Talk us through what happens if someone had a bad experience with that employer and they're having to list them. How do you navigate that?
so I really suggest you look into this for doctors. Most chiropractors have worked in another chiropractic clinic, and most chiropractic offices are small businesses. Now, there are exceptions to this rule, but most of them are small businesses. If the chiropractor that is applying at your office does not list the practice owner as a reference, that is a red flag to me. So if they list another chiropractor in the practice and they don't list the practice owner, or they list the office manager and not the practice owner, that is a huge red flag to me. And so I have had this happen, not, employers and employees, there's not always a great relationship there, but the candidates that have had a bad relationship with their employer, I really respect them if they come to me up front and they say, "Hey, I did not have a great relationship with my previous employer, and this is why." They get extra points if they still list the practice owner as a reference, even though they know there's not a good relationship there. And that helps me because I do want to talk to the practice owner, but I know to take what they say with a grain of salt because I've already heard the candidate's side there. And I
Right.
can sort of decipher that for myself. And so anybody that can tell me up front that they didn't have a great relationship and why. And also when we get down to this background check and drug screen, if the candidate can tell me up front if there's ever been an issue, I have more respect for them, and the chances of them still being considered in my office are way higher than if they didn't tell me this information.
Just find it out
Mhm.
throughout the process,
Yeah.
which is understood. So, with that being said, we've kind of covered everything I think with the reference checks and the valuable nature of calling all 3 and really getting multiple perspectives on said applicants. So, let's move on down to the personality test. We do a personality test when we hire, and this is something I really enjoyed. Applicants, you will learn something about yourself, and you will also be telling the employer kind of things about yourself and how you work. So, Dr. Duncan, kind of talk us through the personality test and how we do it here.
Yeah, so I added this step 9, the personality test, to this hiring system this past year, and it's been wonderful. And so we use 2 tests when we are hiring candidates. We use the Colby test, and it's another test called the Print test.
Right.
So the Colby test tells us how our candidates problem solve, and the Print test tells us more about the candidate's personality, what when they're excited, how they respond, what their shadow um, behavior is, and their triggers if they're under stress or under pressure. And so at this point, you're very interested in your candidate. To me, these tests help us learn even more about the candidate. I do want to say the results of these personality tests, they should not determine whether you're going to hire the candidate or not. So everybody has a different personality, but it's great to sort of learn what that personality is so that even when you go to give a job offer, you know what they're going to respond best to when hopefully if they are a an employee in your office, you're going to know how to speak to them, to work with them. And this is the first time that we're really investing in the candidate. These tests that we do, they're not expensive, they're not cheap. They can run. There's some of them are expensive, and I tell the candidate that, I'm going to pay for this for you to take. The candidate usually likes taking the test because they get to learn a lot about themselves. And so you can really pick any sort of personality test that you would like. There's, the Myers-Briggs test, there's all sorts of tests, but I do recommend you need to do the same test for every candidate. And if you're just starting this, I do suggest that you have your staff and team members take these tests as well, because you will start, if you do the same test for every person that comes through, you will start to get a library of personality types, and people follow patterns. Unless they're mentally unstable, most people will fall into a pattern. And once you start to learn what these patterns and personality types are, it dealing with different types of people becomes a whole lot easier. And this is a way that you can learn about them and they can learn about themselves.
Right, and we still reference these. I mean, even once they're hired on, we'll still be like, "Go back to their print results. What was that about?" That's what that was about. We have the answer right in front of us. So, we can really you learn so much. We're big advocates of the Colby and Print test here. So you learn a lot from whatever test you end up doing. You take away from it a lot as the applicant, but also in the future in your job. We reference them all the time in order to kind of get to the root of any issues. So, moving on, we are moving on to the background test and the drug screen, which is our last step before we get to that job offer. So, Dr. Duncan, talk to us about the importance of a background test and a drug test.
Yes. So you're getting really close at this point to making a hire. And I
Right?
know you're excited, but we have one more step to go. We need to do a background check and a drug screen. And you need to do both of these tests, and you need to get the results before you make the job offer. So you need to do a background check on all of your candidates as well as a drug screen. And I won't tell you why. So if you ever have a malpractice claim, say one of your employees hurts a patient, say they get burned on, stem or whatever. If you have a claim, sometimes the defense attorney, they will ask for, they'll ask you, they'll pull records of employee training, and you need to know if there was an issue with the employee before hiring them. You don't want the first time that you find out that your employee is a convicted felon to be when there is a problem, when there's a malpractice claim.
Of course.
And also, same thing, we're in healthcare. Like we don't want to hurt patients. We want to be very aware of what's going on. You don't want somebody that's under the influence of drugs or alcohol. And so we want to do a drug test to see if there's a history of that. And you also need to let your candidates know, you need to have a policy that they are subject to random drug testing at any time. So you definitely want to learn these things about your candidates before hiring them. These tests are as long as the candidate goes and gets the test, it's usually a urine test. Depending on what you order, it could be a blood test too for the drug screen. Once they go and get the test, you can usually get the results within 24 hours. And then the background check, as long as the candidate, signs the release and the waiver for it and they supply their social security number, that's almost instantaneous.
Right. So talk to us like what happens if something comes up from either of the two?
Yeah. So, and this happens.
It
And
does.
if you have not hired professional staff like doctors in your clinic, I thought because someone was a doctor and they're professional that I would not have to deal with issues with stuff coming up on background checks and drug screenings. But I actually have more come up when we are interviewing doctors than I do with our support staff. So don't let that surprise you. But if the candidate will tell me up front, if they'll say, hey, I had a misdemeanor 5 years ago, this is what happened.
Right.
I, I, had a DUI 10 years ago. This is what happened. If they come to me up front and tell me, I have a lot more respect for them, and the likelihood of me still considering them is a whole lot higher than if I find something on the background check and drug screen and they did not tell me. So this actually happened. I interviewed, this is always an evergreen process. So I'm always interviewing. I'm always interviewing doctors. Our clinic director, he's always interviewing support staff because we want to find great people in our clinic. But I had a doctor apply, and I hired them. Lesson learned to me. I learned so much about hiring. I've learned so much throughout the years, but I didn't do some of these tests that I'm talking about now. And they went to go get their chiropractic license for our state, and they were an existing chiropractor, but their license just wasn't coming back. It doesn't take that long. It had been several months, and we just didn't have a license. Like, what was going on? And I asked them, what's the situation? Why don't we have a license? They said, I don't know. So I called down to our board and figured out that there was a outstanding drug charge, and that is why we couldn't get our chiropractic license in this state. And so I don't want to find out those things after a hire. You need to know these things up front, and then you know what you're facing.
Absolutely.
So, and that can help you if you're on the fence with a candidate and, you make it to the background check and drug screen and there's some things that you don't like, obviously this will help you make your decision. But you need to know these things as the hiring um, manager or the practice owner up front before any job offer is made.
Right. So, anything else with I mean, we know how important it is to do a background test, do a drug screening, especially before someone's hired on. So, with that being said, is there anything else with that you want to add?
No, we just want to get the results. And sometimes I've seen companies go ahead and offer a job and it is contingent on the results of a background check or drug
Interesting.
screen. I don't suggest doing that. Like, you talk about a mess that you got to get out of, then I
Yeah.
would not do that. These tests don't take that long. So, and you're telling the candidate up front that you're doing them. So I would just wait for your results.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say everything is coming back with green flags. It is almost to the finish line. We are on step 11, the job offer. Go ahead, Dr. Duncan, and kind of give us a rundown on how you like to do your job offer.
Yes. So once we get the all these tests back, the personality test, the background check, and the drug screen, and you feel great about this candidate, it is time to give a job offer. And so the candidate, they've been through this is a longer process. Hopefully they're very excited. I'm very excited at this point. And so we want to give an exciting job offer.
Right.
So I usually write up a fun email and I try to make it personal, and I send this exciting email about um, the job offer. And then I also, in this offer at the end, I tell the candidate that they have to give us an answer by a certain time period. So there's an expiration date to this job offer. So a lot of times, sometimes I'll give a job offer on a Friday, and the candidate has to give me an answer by 10 a.m. the following Monday. If I give a job offer during the week, say on a Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning, I give them 24 hours. They have to give me an answer by 10 a.m., the next day. And you may think, that's not a lot of time. That's a big decision to make. But you got to remember, this process has taken weeks. And if the candidate does not know if they want the job at this point, that that's a problem.
Yeah.
That means that you were not transparent with them, or they were not transparent with you. And so I always send over a DocuSign document for the candidate to sign, and that is that is the candidate officially taking the job offer.
Okay.
So in the case of a support staff member, I send them just a written job offer for them to sign. In the case of a doctor, it is going to be the contract that they sign. And I want to say this, there should absolutely be nothing new, and there should be no surprises in this contract or in this job offer. Everything in that job offer or contract should have already been discussed and already been talked about. And so that should make the decision very fast for your candidate. They should not be going through information, and they shouldn't really have a lot of questions for you. If they do have questions, that's fine. I do state in my job offer email that if the candidate has questions, that they need to ask me those questions prior to the job expiration date. And I'm more than happy to answer those questions for them. And you need to, obviously be checking your email during that time period as the hiring manager or the practice owner. Even if it's on a weekend, you need to check it.
Right. So what happens if, say for instance, someone does send you those questions, but it's like at the deadline time?
This is very disheartening. If someone goes through the entire, and I've had this happen, if someone
Man.
goes through the entire hiring funnel and they ask you questions at 10 o'clock on Monday when, the job offer expires, it's so hard at this point because you put so much time and energy into this candidate, but don't hire them. They did not follow directions. You're going to have problems with them down the road. This is lesson learned. I am telling you things that this has happened to me.
Right. You
More than,
wouldn't be saying it if
yeah,
it exactly.
I learned my lesson and I want you to not have to go through this.
Yeah.
So they're just not a good candidate. And I will say a lot of candidates, they are going to wait until right before that deadline to sign the final contract or the job offer. And I think this is human nature. They're trying to think through the job.
Just
Sometimes,
one more time
right.
almost. Yeah.
So don't be surprised if you don't get an answer, until an hour or two before. Now you're really excited. Candidates will usually sign immediately. And that also gives you some insight too. They're usually going to be fabulous. Just, they're going to be so into your culture and so into your brand. They're just
They're
excited.
bought in. They're
Yeah.
bought in.
Yeah.
Yes. I love that. So I really like to focus more on like just the excitement of the job offer. It really should just be a moment of like you put in all this work for yourself. Your job, your chiropractic office has put in plenty of work on their end. Your hiring manager, your practice owner. So this should just be a moment to celebrate both of you finding a good match and getting excited because this is simply the first step. The hiring process has been a little tedious, but we have not even talked about onboarding, and that is really important to establish amazing employees at your office.
Yeah. So the hiring funnel, I mean, this is just half the battle.
Yes.
Once you get a great candidate and they take the job, we go into onboarding, which is another conversation for another time. But the candidates, they go through, we've heard about buyer's remorse. So say you buy, something expensive like a new refrigerator, you may have buyer's remorse for which one you bought, but candidates go through hiring remorse. And so you really want to make sure that the time between when the candidate, takes the job offer and then their first day of starting in the office, that you are communicating with them, you're engaging with them, you're keeping them excited. And so that is part of the onboarding process, which is a whole nother set of conversations on their own.
Yes, absolutely. So before we kind of wrap up, I mean, that's all the 11 steps broken down. But before we wrap up, kind of talk to me about how did you get here from, the start to now you have this 11-step process that really, really works?
Yeah, so I'm still a working practice owner. I'm still a treating chiropractor, and I'm always learning. And we are adding, we created this funnel system and we're always adding to it. But experience, and I have made mistakes myself, and I have to learn from those mistakes. And every time a candidate doesn't work out, I will write down, what are some things that we can change. And
Right.
that's how we got to this point. I've hired and fired a lot of people. And I've learned that when we get good team members, that we want to keep them. And I want to keep and protect our culture. And if we've got someone that's even once they've been hired, and because sometimes I'll tell you this, even 10 years into this, sometimes the people that I interview and go through this interview funnel are not the people that show up to work. And that doesn't happen very often anymore, but it still happens. And so if you find a candidate and they're not a good fit in your clinic, you have to get them out. So you have to protect your team. So experience, I've made mistakes on my own. I've learned a lot. You learn a lot about personalities, and that, people fall into they have different personality patterns, and you start to figure out what those are. But
Absolutely.
this system is a fast track. Um, you can learn through trial and error, and we all do, but this having a system for hiring will help fast track this learning process, quickly.
Right, saving time and money on
Oh,
everybody's watch. So, I mean, I'm a big advocate for it just for those 2 points alone. So that is the hiring funnel. Dr. Duncan, any little extra tidbits?
I don't think so. It's just,
Okay.
you know, it's a learning process, and every time you make a bad hire, you have to turn that situation around and ask yourself, what would I do differently?
What
And
was the learning lesson?
right.
Right. Well, thank you so much for kind of giving us a breakdown on all the hiring funnel. We've talked about these steps plenty of times, and we are really excited to present this podcast to you guys. If you took anything away from this podcast and you really want to know more about the hiring funnel, this hiring funnel is a free digital download on Dr. Duncan's website, Dr. Mary Frances Duncan. Dr. Duncan also goes into even more detail with her one-on-one coaching, where she will coach you one on one in order to help you make your systems and your hiring productive and successful. So she also does offer that and a course that is coming soon. So, with that being said, please also check out her social media where you can stay in the loop as to when she'll be opening her course, when she is taking new clients for coaching, and also when we have new podcasts being posted. If you took anything away from this podcast, please give us a 5-star review. Reviews help us know what you want to hear, and know that you're liking what we're putting out into the world. So, we really appreciate those 5-star reviews, and that makes us feel like we're doing the right thing. So, thank you so much in advance. I think that is all today for I'm Simply Saying. Dr. Duncan, any final words?
No final words. Thank you all for listening.
Okay, we'll see you later. Bye.